We've all been in slumps. It usually comes after those times when we've been doing the daily grind for a long time. We're not looking up much, but getting stuff done. After a while, we get tired, worn down, uninspired. We get so immersed in whatever we're doing that when we're finally asked to pull out something creative or do some sort of creative innovation, we're empty. Our tank is empty. Let's talk about ways to brighten our creative spark, cross-pollinating our way to innovation after this brief introduction. Hello, and welcome to Quality During Design, the place to use quality thinking to create products others love for less. I'm your host, Diana Dini. I'm a senior-level quality professional and engineer with over 20 years of experience in manufacturing and design. I consult with businesses and coach individuals in how to apply quality during design to their processes. Listen in and then join us. Visit qualityduringdesign.com. Welcome back to the episode. I am back from a family spring break trip. This was something that was scheduled way in advance, and it was a sightseeing trip, seeing the western part of the United States through a train ride. I wasn't really feeling like I needed a break, but it was something where, spring break is scheduled, so everybody has time to spend together to go do something if they want to. What happened is I had a great time, and I ended up filling my bucket, so to speak. And I hadn't even realized that I needed that break, because when I came back, getting back into work and my contracts and my business, I came back refreshed with new inspiration and bigger ideas. What happened to me is that I was in deep immersion on a certain project and didn't even realize that I needed to sort of step away from it for a while to get refreshed. And I know this happens to you too. We get so immersed in whatever product we're working on or within working in our industry, and we get stuck in our usual patterns using the same tools and techniques all the time that we start to develop these echo chambers for our own ideas. We start to create trends of habits that we just kind of follow, and we're not critically evaluating the ideas that we're coming up with. We're sort of in a slump or in a rut. And then when we have an opportunity to be creative, we're kind of stuck, or we don't have a lot of creativity, or we can feel a little bit frustrated that we're not coming up with the sort of ideas that we think we ought to be able to. So really the question that we're asking ourselves today is, how can I reliably inject fresh, innovative thinking into my design process, especially when I feel creatively blocked? Stuart Walsh wrote a book just for engineers. It's called Introduction to Creativity and Innovation for Engineers. He was interviewed by the Engineering Management Institute for the Civil Engineering podcast. I'll link to it in the show notes. With all of Stu's experiences and insights, there are 3 things that work consistently for him. One is timing activities in your day, doing heavy thinking first thing in the morning. That's what works for him. Exercising and reading books. When the interviewer asked him what are the things that work the most for him, those are the 3 things that he listed: timing activities, exercising, and reading books. And I wholeheartedly agree. I use those 3 things myself. For Stu, he realized at the time of day where he was the most creative and can do his best work was first thing when he's fresh. For you, it might be a different part of the day. Knowing that about ourselves helps us to organize our day so that we can maximize our creativity when we're feeling the most creative. Exercising helps to get our blood moving. Even taking a shower, taking a walk, doing an activity while we're thinking about something can help us. And then he mentioned reading books. All of these things that Stu mentioned have to do with scheduling activities. And I want to take what Stu came up with, which I agree with, to a next step, the next step further, because we want to brighten our creative spark. So let's schedule some dedicated exploration time. This could be travel, like I did with my family on spring break, going to museums, signing up to go to conferences that are related to the work topics that you do now, or maybe it's a tangentially related work topic, maybe something that one of your cross-functional teammates would go to. For example, I went to some regulatory conferences when I was working as a product design engineer. Or it could be a conference that's just completely different. What we really want to do is to schedule some time to see some new patterns, problems, and solutions. So we can start cross-pollinating ideas from other places into our own creative processes. An easy thing to do, which is something that Stu mentioned, was reading books. I enjoy reading on my own. Reading with a friend is the most fun, but that doesn't happen often, so I also enjoy listening to podcasts of others who have read the same thing. Lately, I've been choosing books based on what podcasters are talking about, just so I can listen in and take a deeper dive into the material. I have my own favorite book podcasters for fiction books. For nonfiction books, I can offer some of our previous episodes that included a book review discussion, and they're all books that are related to engineering. I'll link to all of those in the show notes. You can also look for author interviews. They provide some deeper insights into why they wrote the book, or focus in on one or more aspects of it. Do you have a nonfiction book you're reading or you want to read? Do an internet search on the author and or the book title. Or ask ChatGPT or Gemini with this prompt. Find podcast episodes related to this author and book title. Then find podcast episodes where this author was a guest. List all episodes by date published. If there are any, I'm sure they will come up with a list that maybe you can explore to take your book reading to the next level. So that was our step number 1 toward brightening our creative spark, which was scheduling activities, purposely choosing things to explore our world in new ways. So that first step will help us get started, but then there's a couple other things that we really need to do or should do for ourselves. One is to just practice analogy thinking. We can ask ourselves, how is my challenge that I'm stewing on and trying to figure out, how is that like this concept from another field? One of my favorite stories was about a potato chip manufacturer. They wanted to make a potato chip that was extra crispy and didn't have as much oil on it. And they were stuck. They had done all the usual things, or they wanted to create a new type of potato chip for the consumer that was less greasy. They had to look out of whatever they had been doing for years and outside of their own food manufacturing to come up with a solution. And actually, it was a violinist who came up with the solution. Somebody that played a musical instrument that was more knowledgeable about sound waves and how that could shake the excess oil off the potato chip to create a crisper chip. That is practicing analogy thinking, combining knowledge about musical instruments and sound waves to a food product to make something different, to do something in a new way. A more structured approach to this kind of thinking could be TRIZ, T-R-I-Z, which is theory of inventive thinking. I have another previous episode on TRIZ that I'll link to in the show notes. Really, with practicing analogy thinking, you want to map structures and relationships from one domain to another domain, and doing this will often reveal some novel approaches that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. Back to our topic, ways to brighten our creative spark. We've talked about scheduling activities for ourselves that are purposely exposing us to different domains. Another one is practicing analogy thinking, where we're starting to map different domains together to form new ideas. And the last one that we'll talk about today is to keep a cross-pollination journal or a swipe file. Here's the thing. We've been out experiencing things and we're thinking about things and making new connections. Now we want to write it down somewhere. If we come up with an idea, just jot it down, our initial thoughts of how it might relate back to design and the kind of things that we're working on. Even if it's a stretch, take a note of it. What you want in the end is a personal repository of ideas that you can revisit when you're facing a design challenge. I used to have a friend that preferred to do these things in a Word document so that he could do a search on it. You can write it in a physical book, keeping a table of contents in the front to what idea you put where. Just as long as you can refer back to it later when you're stuck and you need that creative spark. Really, we don't want to just focus on more ideas, but different kinds of ideas. So we started our episode here with a problem of just not having a pool of creativity to pull from. And we talked about 3 things that we could do. One is to schedule activities. The second thing was for us to practice analogy thinking. And the third was to keep a cross-pollination journal or a swipe file that we could reference later. What's today's insight to action? Creativity isn't mystical. It thrives on diverse inputs. So your next great design breakthrough might be waiting in a history book, a nature documentary, or a conversation with someone from a completely different profession. So I recommend your action this week is to schedule 90 minutes for intentional, non-design exploration. Pick something from the list that we discussed, a museum, a documentary, a walk with observational intent. Go in curious. Don't force connections immediately, just absorb. Afterwards, spend 15 minutes jotting down anything that caught your attention and one potential, even loose connection to a design problem you're mulling over. I'd love to hear about your own cross-pollination experiments. What unexpected places have you found design inspiration? Share your experience. Just click the Send Us a Text link that's at the top of the show notes. And speaking of show notes, there's also a blog post with extra information and links that you can refer to. I mentioned quite a few during the episode. They'll all be there in the blog post at Quality During Design. This has been a production of Dini Enterprises. Thanks for listening.